Some years ago, I got an email from a man named Frank. He had a company in the San Francisco Bay Area, and he wanted to fly out for treatment. He had a company with a lot of employees he really cared deeply about. His fatigue had increased, and he was afraid that he would be unable to run his company. Frank had MS. And I told him up front that MS is relapsing and remitting. It looks better on some days or some weeks, and then it gets worse again. So I really wanted to clarify that we were working on increasing his energy, mental alertness, and ability to sleep well. And this is about as far as we could go, and I just wanted to manage those expectations up front. He wasn't expecting a miracle. While we were talking, he described the first time he started to have symptoms of MS, and it was right after he got back from the Vietnam War. His pulse was soggy, especially at the deep layers, and his tongue showed signs of water retention, and the coating was thick. I asked him to describe his memories of Vietnam, and I was kind of approaching it gently and was expecting, maybe a lot of PTSD, a lot of stress had sort of ignited whatever sort of gene expression may or may not be involved with MS. And he said that he hadn't actually seen any combat. It was relatively a boring experience for him. He was kind of fatalistic. He wasn't that stressed about it. But he said the worst thing was constantly wading through swamps. And he said it went from being unpleasant to physically nauseating. So I started to think, just forgetting everything that I knew for a moment about MS, which conventional medical wisdom out there honestly isn't that great, so it wasn't hard for me to let go of that, and instead I just listened to him. I considered the effects of molds and fungi as neurotoxins and neuroendocrine disruptors. I also thought about swamp gases as potential neurotoxins. Hydrogen sulfide is found in swamp gas. It's also a powerful gasotransmitter in the body. It can serve as a neurotransmitter. Too much or too little will shut down neural transmission, even permanently. In the right amount, however, it can help to regenerate nerves. The gas found in swamps and hydrothermal vents that really help to start life on this planet from the hydrothermal vents falls in line with the traditional Chinese idea of kidney qi or yuan qi. I wanted to take this into consideration as well as look at the microbiota and potential systemic fungal infections. What really stuck with me was that he was telling me about this increased visceral reaction, how it was nauseating for him to get in the swamps. At first it was just grody, but then it was really, really disgusting. And when he got back, that feeling of disgust kind of stayed with him. His tongue and pulse showed signs of water retention and systemic fungi. His inflammatory markers also showed signs which would be in line with his systemic fungal infection. I thought in particular about an herb called cangzhu, which was first used to treat numbness due to fungal exposure, or wind damp as they called it in ancient times. So I used a very aggressive antifungal therapy. I used ermiao, a combination of cangzhu and huangbai, along with other antifungal herbs. Within a few weeks, he started to feel strength in his legs. He came in for his checkup and everything was going well, and so I increased the dose. At this time, he was completely wheelchair bound and had been for years. However, within a month, he was out of his chair and he started to walk again. He was over the moon, he felt mentally clear, and was much more confident with regard to his ability to take care of his employees. I did my obligatory buzzkill, reciting the Merck manual, like the Bible, saying that MS is relapsing and remitting, he shouldn't expect it to get better, or even that this improvement had anything to do with me. I wanted to be very responsible, and really, I was doing this because there's kind of an unwritten rule. If you use Chinese medicine and it's ahead of its time in terms of what Western medicine can do, you don't want to get too far ahead. This is something that my teacher had told me as well. If Western medicine's on the verge of curing something, you can go ahead and talk about it. But don't talk about it when you're 2 steps ahead, because that can cause certain types of jealousy or problems for you. So this is a mentality that I'd kind of taken. So I was like, look, slow down. It may not get better. He just looked at me and said, I know it's relapsing and remitting, and I've had this longer than you've been alive. So he knew the drill. He knew what I had to say. He was elated. And he had gone from wheelchair bound to walking. His goal was simply to be thinking well so he could run his company properly and take care of his employees. He really loved the community there. He wanted to do his part in that company and really contribute. So that was his goal. However, when he was able to get up and walk, he really started to redouble his efforts and talk to me about diet and was really very serious about eating foods which would nurture his microbiome and not contribute to potentially pathogenic blooms of fungi and bacteria that could be serving to hinder his progression, or I should say advance his progression of MS and hinder his healing. So over time, he was doing really well with his exercises. He was doing Qigong. He was taking his herbs. And eventually I started getting him down to just Ermiao, which is 2 herbs. He was flying back and forth. So I said, look, I'm just going to show you how to order this in bulk. And then at this point, you're self-sufficient. Just keep doing Tai Chi and Qigong in the Bay Area. And that's about as good as it will be. And, he said that even if he tomorrow is back in his chair and never gets out again, he felt incredibly encouraged that he had the power of doing something for himself in a positive direction and had objective proof that it could help him. So if his mind felt foggy or if he felt tired, he knew that he could fight back for the first time in a long time. He was self-sufficient, happy, and feeling in control of his body, his life, and his company. There's research that's come out showing that in Western medicine, people have been using antifungal therapies and it's been helping with MS. So because of that, at this point, I feel like I can go ahead and say, yes, this happened. Yes, these possibilities are there, but at the same time not tell people, oh, if you have MS and you've been in a chair for years, I have the miracle treatment, because I don't know if that's true or not. What I do know is that this gentleman presented with signs and symptoms of having a chronic fungal infection. His Western medical diagnosis was MS, and I just treated what was in front of me and listened to him. The results were extraordinary. They were literally out of the ordinary. And I also need to keep in mind that there may be many types of MS. There may be many causative factors of MS. The jury is still out. What I would like to do is go over a little bit about what is known currently. MS, multiple sclerosis, is the most common type of non-traumatic neurological disability in young adults. It's an inflammatory disorder, and it's caused by nerves losing their myelin sheath. The myelin sheath serves as insulation. They lose the sheath, and as a result, the nerves start to degrade. If you've had the Epstein-Barr virus, you're more likely to have MS. It's a risk factor. There's also an increase if you're smoking, as that will increase or decrease microcirculation. With vitamin D deficiency, people who are in young adulthood and female. So the smoking, we can look at that dropping the microcirculation. Perhaps there's something else at play. Vitamin D deficiency, that's interesting. The young adulthood and particularly females is something that's caught a lot of people's attention because those are the demographics, young adulthood and primary female, who are the most vulnerable for sexually transmitted infections. There are a number of infectious agents that are suspected to be triggering MS, and there's a lot of evidence coming out showing links between established MS and gut microbiota. Most of the studies are looking at bacteria. However, fungi are very likely playing an important role. There are a lot of links between fungi and diseases involving idiopathic inflammation, which have been found. Candida and the gut for instance, associated with psoriasis and Crohn's disease. Antibodies against fungi are risk factors for psoriasis, and fungicides improve symptoms. So that was certainly what we had found. We were using fungicidal, however you want to say it, therapy that was also safeguarding the microbiome. Many neurological disorders are in fact disorders of latent pathogens. Imbalances within us help them to set up shop. Once there, they do what they can to stay and terraform us to their own liking. As they eat us alive, it saps a lot of our energy, and either they are directly killing nerves or the inflammation itself will degrade the nervous tissue. I believe that this is at work when it comes to multiple sclerosis. I think the myelin sheaths are likely becoming eaten, possibly by fungi. I think that's the most likely culprit. And, possibly bacteria and viruses as well, or most likely they're working in concert. One may be weakening it in one way, and then another gets in, bypasses the immune system by way of a biofilm. And in this way, they're able to spread throughout the nerves, just eating their way along the sheaths, leaving the nerves vulnerable and then becoming degraded. With MS, the legs tend to become weak first, and this weakness is referred to as atrophy system in Chinese medicine. When it affects the legs, it's usually seen as a yin pathogen, which means they're looking for sedimentation in the body, anything that's going to be sinking down, which is usually water retention, which harbors fungi. So it wasn't just a fluke. It wasn't necessarily a genius moment for me, but it was just listening to him. He was sitting around in a swamp. Maybe his body had some water retention. He's sitting around in a swamp. That whatever nasties were in that swampy environment in Vietnam got in, settled in, and as a result have been eating him ever since. Thankfully, he now knows how to fight back, and as a result, his quality of life has improved dramatically. He's able to think clearer. He's able to help those in his company. The last I saw of him, he was incredibly elated. He hadn't relapsed, and he was kind of on an upward trajectory. I'd like to think that kept going on. Who knows? And always there are outlying cases. So keep in mind, if you see somebody with MS, latent fungi may well be a culprit. And also keep in mind that if you're feeling tired or beaten down, it could very well be that your internal microbiota is off kilter, perhaps because of a latent fungi, maybe because of the microbiota itself, a little bit of both. The more you can balance these, the better you're going to be able to think, and the clearer the decision-making process will be. To really bio-optimize your life, you're going to want to cultivate a garden of microbiota. And with this cultivated garden, the pathogenic bacteria, fungi, and viruses will have a very difficult time proliferating. I used to carry every herbal formula I could get my hands on. You can just imagine how this clogged up shelf space and mental space, plus it gave me a lot to dust every week. We looked at our most effective products, our automatic top sellers, and found that they coincided with the most popular and effective herbal products in East Asia. We decided to focus on the winners and then make them even better. Our research team in Chengdu upgraded these formulas using the highest quality herbs on the planet and rigorously testing them at pharmaceutical standard for quality and safety. You'll want to get your hands on this, and you'll get your supplies at botanicalbiohacking.com. Thanks for listening to the Botanical Biohacking Podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Miles.